Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our bracket tip series. This is episode 3 of a 7-part series. If you haven't already seen the first 2 episodes, make sure to go check them out on our channel. Those episodes detailed the history of the NCAA bracket as well as how to identify a first round upset. This episode, episode number 3, will deal with how to identify a Cinderella team. So let's get going. So, for those of you who don't know what a Cinderella team is, we have a very unique definition of it, and we'll get into that in a minute. But what we want to say is a Cinderella team, it can be the biggest thing that sets you apart from others in your bracket pool in the early rounds, right? A lot of people, they'll take all 4 1 seeds, all 4 2, everything like that. If you can correctly pick the 1 or maybe 2 top seeds, if there's a 2 seed or a 3 seed that goes down, if you can pick those and pick, I'd say like 10 through 14 seed that moves on, that can set you apart and set you up for success later on down the line, especially if there's not much differentiation within your bracket pool as to who the champion is. I know a lot of people do bracket pools with people from their schools or, if you're in a certain college and stuff, and that can bias, the entire group, the entire bracket pool to pick certain games certain ways. So if you can just be smart and, choose those 1 or 2 upsets, it can set you up for a very, very nice experience in that second weekend and then the Final Four weekend into the national championship. So on the screen right now, we have some very notable Cinderella stories. You have George Mason making the Final Four. Florida Gulf Coast made the Sweet 16 as a 15 seed, the only one to do so in the last 20 years. And then obviously the memorable Loyola Chicago team from 2 years ago, 2 tournaments ago now, 3 years ago as of right now. And then on the right there, you have Jim Valvano, probably the most infamous Cinderella story, him and his NC State Wolfpack in, I believe it was 1986. Very infamous college basketball video there. So moving on, how do you identify a Cinderella team? Well, it's all about finding a balance, right? You want to find a balance between the actual Cinderella team that you believe in. You want to find a good enough team there, but you also want to find maybe a weaker or maybe an overvalued top seed. A top seed we consider in that 2 to 5 range, and we especially want to focus on that 2 seed line. It's not necessarily that we would pick the 15 seed, but if you look at who the 2 seed would typically match up against in the second round, it would be either the 7 or the 10. So if you can find a 10 seed or even a 7 seed for that matter, who you really like and really believe in, and they're in the same region as, say, the weakest 2 seed or a 2 seed that you think has a big bust potential, then that might be a good option for you. As you can see on the screen, it says it opens up a good 10 seed run to the Sweet 16, but even that for a 7 seed as well. And then also another tip that we have is find a 10 to 14 seed that has a good offense. Offense for these lower seeded teams are a lot more important than defense. I know they say defense wins championships, but offense can win you a game, right? You're not going to, no offense, I don't think you're going to see a 14 seed, win a slugfest against a 2 seed or a 3 seed. But you could see them win a shootout, if they're just really hot from 3 that day or really hot from the field and get a couple turnovers, you could see them win that game. So, and also in terms of actual players that you're looking for, we're going to get into this later, but when determining a national champion, you want to look for a very balanced team, a team that doesn't rely too heavily on one player. That rarely works. The last time I can remember was Kemba Walker in UConn in 2011. But besides that, championship teams don't really depend on one person, but for an upset, for a Cinderella team, you're looking for someone who's liable to go off on any given night. You're looking for someone who, they don't have to average 25 points. There's very few and far between in college basketball. You'll see someone like that. But someone who's capable of dropping 25 points. You look at the notable Cinderellas. You have like Florida State, Kansas State, Loyola Chicago from years past. They all had someone who could drop 25 points in a night. And if you have one guy who drops 25 points, that takes a huge load off of the rest of your roster to where they can just have average games and maybe spring the upset over that top 4 seed. So, yeah, like we say there, it's not quite the same as choosing a champion, but nonetheless, you still want to be able to identify individual players who will make an impact. And this is a common myth. A lot of people say, oh, you want to take the hot team or you don't want to take the hot team coming in. We've actually done a little bit of analysis, and being hot per se is what most people determine hot, on a big win streak, doesn't actually have any real significance in determining which team is actually going to be the Cinderella that year. We did some math, and 45% of the Cinderellas that we identified over the past 20 years, so since the year 2000, they were 5 or worse in their final 10 games during their conference tournament and regular season. So that should show you that you don't necessarily have to be on the biggest winning streak. And actually, if you are, it might be an omen. You might be due for a bad game. You look at, say, Belmont, right? Belmont obviously didn't make the tournament this year, or most likely will not. We don't know the field yet, but we don't see them getting an at-large bid. They were on a huge winning streak up until the end of the year when they lost, their best scorer, and at that point they were overdue for some regression. So you don't necessarily want to take the team that's super, super hot. Obviously, being hot is good, but being hot isn't everything, and that's what we want you to take away from this. In determining which team to take, only 12 of the upset or the Cinderellas that we identified over the past 20 years, and we identified 24 of them, were only 12 of them, so half of them were automatic qualifiers. So that means that only 12 were AQs, which means that the other 12 didn't win their conference tournaments, right? So they had a loss pretty late in the year. In March, they lost a game. And so that shows that you don't necessarily have to be a conference champion. You could be, say, in a Power 5 conference or a multi-bid league and not win that and still get in and make your presence felt in March Madness. So don't necessarily limit yourself to picking those conference champions either. There's definitely some value in that 10 to 12 line with some at-large bids. So finding some evidence in the stats. This is where we want you to realize what sort of statistical things are you looking for in a potential Cinderella team, and that's someone who can make it to the Sweet 16 as a double-digit seed, someone who maybe at like a 6 seed or higher can make the Elite 8 and maybe even the Final 4. So what do you want to look at? There's a good chance that that team lies really high up in Ken Palm's offensive ratings, right? In the top 50 to 75 area in that. They're going to have a good offense. You're also going to want to look at strength of schedule. If they've played a really tough schedule, that might translate into less wins than they should have, and then they're used to playing that caliber of opponent that they would see in March Madness in the tournament. So that's also a good thing to look for. A positive turnover percentage margin is essential. This is the one thing we found that is an absolute between all of these Cinderellas. If a team turns the ball over more than they turn it, or more than they generate steals and turnovers from their opponents, they will not be able to upset the good teams. You always say what separates a good team from a bad team. It's not necessarily the talent of their players, it's the way that they play. And that means including those turnovers in that thought process. A good team doesn't necessarily have to shoot 40% from three. If they can shoot way less, they can shoot average from these places, but they just won't turn the ball over. And so that's what we're saying is we need a team that does not have dumb turnovers, a team that can generate enough turnovers from their opponents to get that many extra possessions, because if you want to say mediocrity, obviously these teams are good, they made the tournament, but mediocrity can outperform talent and big name success when those big name schools fail to play hard. When they play stupid and they turn the ball over, that's when you can see a Duke losing to a Mercer. Obviously, if those two teams played 10 games, Duke should win 9 or all 10 of them. But if they have a stupid game and they get flustered and they keep, failing like Duke did against Mercer way back when, or against Lehigh or MTSU upsetting Michigan State, when those big name schools, when they get flustered, they might not have been challenged like that. So turnovers are a huge, huge thing. So look for a team with a positive turnover percentage differential. You're also going to want to look for players that are experienced, right? So we talk about years of experience. You can see on there, look for their top 3 scorers to have about 9+ years of college basketball experience behind them. So you're looking for these mid-major schools and going on down into the small majors, right? Low major conferences that have one bid. Look for senior heavy teams, right? Look for teams with experience, guys that have played, 90 games at the college level instead of this being their freshman year. The big name schools can be led by those freshmen because those freshmen are consensus top 50 or top 20 people or consensus future NBA players. But these smaller schools probably aren't going to have that NBA level talent or even that ESPN top 100 talent. But if you can find a team that relies on scorers that are very experienced, very composed, like Loyola did back in 2018, they had a lot of seniors on that team. Obviously, they had Cameron Krutwig, who was on their team this year, and I believe they had Williamson as well. So, but besides that, they were a very experienced team. So that's what you want to look for. Experience. That's where you're going to find an upset. And also, 3-point percentage isn't necessary, but it can lead an upset charge. Now, what that means, the team doesn't have to be... The 3-point percentage of a team is not going to determine whether or not they pull an upset. So just because a team's really good at shooting threes does not mean you should take them as an upset. What it means is if they can shoot the 3 well, they have the potential to make the upset. If they play well, if they play smart, if they game plan well, that 3-point percentage will assist them over an opponent who might not shoot as well. So don't look at 3-point percentage if the better seeded team can still shoot the three. But if the better seeded team can't really defend the three that well, and the lower seeded team can shoot the three well, that's definitely something that will create a lot of value in those lower seeded teams, anywhere from 10 to 16 seeds. Again, from our last video, don't take a 16 seed to win. It just doesn't make sense. But again, that's besides the point. That's not what this video is about. This video is about Cinderellas, and we feel like we've given you a pretty clear idea as to what a Cinderella is and what to look for in the numbers to identify a Cinderella. In our next video, we will tell you how far to take your Cinderella. Do you take them just to the round of 32, the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final 4 even, maybe to the National Championship? Stay tuned and find out in Episode 4 of our 7-video series, where we will look to bring you the deepest insights into the world of college basketball. My name's Robert Mepham, and for Hoop Power Analytics, thank you for watching.